All right, I see that Debbie has joined us. It is 7:03 and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Julie has informed me that she has a conflict and she's going to get here late. She'll be able to do minutes off of the video, which isn't a problem. Natalie, would you mind doing our roll call votes this evening?
Yep.
And I know we've been staggering which commissioner we start with, and I don't recall where we are. Are there any other commissioners recall who went first last time?
I can just shake it up.
I'll go first. I don't care. I'm here.
All right. Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah.
So, Natalie, could we do a roll call vote, please? Or just a roll call?
Sure.
Attendance?
Yes. Debbie Braun,
Here.
Diana Anton,
Here.
Mick Morrell,
Here. Sorry, I'm making French toast for my girl.
Matt Mitchell,
I'm present.
Matt Rogers.
Here.
Great. Thank you. We have all 5 commissioners present. And I, as president, decided that it would be imprudent to meet in person in light of the governor's COVID-19 disaster proclamation. So we're going to hold this meeting by Zoom. And moving on to item 4 of our agenda, citizen comments. Does anybody have a citizen comment? All right, moving right along. Item 5 on our agenda is approval of the February 9th minutes. Do commissioners have a motion regarding those minutes?
I move to approve the February 9th minutes.
Mitchell seconds. Any discussion? Okay, Natalie, would you mind roll calling a vote, please?
Braun,
Yes.
Anton,
Yes.
Morrell,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
And the motion carries. Moving on to approval of the bills. Brian, could you walk us through this month's bills?
Sure. Nancy Bennett is a refund on an overpayment. Just going through the unusuals here. Chicago Tribune Media Group bid notice for the F-250. As we go further down, Illinois Association of Park Districts was our annual dues, $509.25. It used to be $5,000, but we've been around so long, we get the big discount now. Imaginary Games as a partner class, doing very well, very crowded. Julie Lewis, minute taker for the Ready Committee. LRS is our garbage pickup. Meltzer, Pertel, and Steele is Charles's new firm. And Russo Power Equipment, we had to buy a salt spreader and a pitchfork. Salt spreader was not big enough to handle our needs. Staples, legal pads, paper cups, and paper products. And Andrea Veramenes is our band for Earth Day concert coming up in April. That's it.
Great. Is there a motion regarding the bills? Mitchell.
I'll move to Morrell moves to approve the bills dated March 9th, 2023 in the amount of $31,891.66.
Mitchell seconds. Is there any discussion? Any questions for Brian? All right, Natalie, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Braun,
Yes.
Anton,
Yes.
Morrell,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Brian, could you talk us through the petty cash, please?
Sure. Air Delights was soap dispensers that we hang on the wall and the soap inserts. Amazon office chair for Natalie Salih's office and shelves for the 908 entry. Apple Incorporated iPad memory. Dengio's work crew bought them lunch. They worked through lunch on a snow day. E-file tax forms 1099s for Treasurer Gibbs. Fiverr is a typist to type the ordinance, and MailChimp emails over 2,000.
Is there a motion regarding petty cash?
I move to approve the petty cash.
In the amount of $733.76. All right, Mitchell seconds. Is there any discussion or questions? All right, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Braun,
Yes.
Anton,
Yes.
Morel,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
All right, motion carries. And Mr. Rosinski, we are back to you for a monthly report.
Sure. My monthly report's a little short, but there's 2 additions further down the road and new business. But our search for maintenance level 1 employee has ended. After several interviews, staff discussions, we hired Philippe Lopez. Philippe has extensive park experience. Extensive park experience, and his job before we hired him was with the village of Kenilworth. Philippe started on March 1st, 2023. Philippe's wage is the same as the previous level 1 employee, Luis Rodriguez. President Mitchell was updated on the situation and approved the hiring of Philippe. We have discussed several purchases and installments with different companies and contractors over the past month. We will have numbers back in the very near future for replacing the front door and frame. It's going to be in the area of 7,000. 2 AEDs in the area of 3,000. Kaylee Tot Lot sign 3,300. Concrete pads for 4 new benches, about 4,800. The Kubota we ordered about a year ago should be delivered before the end of this budget. We are currently 12th is what I wrote, but has been updated to 10th on the list. So we're making progress. That's down from 80 originally. And then not in my report because it happened after it was written. Unfortunately, we lost the willow tree at Elks Park in the southeast corner. It's already been removed and grinded. Sunrise came right out. It was destroyed by carpenter ants in the interior, and it broke in half about 20 feet up. Fortunately, nobody went. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments for Mr. Rosinski? All right. Moving along. Thank you, Brian. Next up is Jerry. Are you with us, Jerry? There he is.
There I am. Had a little technical trouble getting things to turn on. Sure. Okay, talking about some of the key items off of the monthly reports you should have received in your packets. On the appropriations side of things, the expenditures through February were running at about 49% of our plan, which is quite a bit below the 63% level that we might target if we had an equal level of expenditures each month throughout the year. In the categories of board development, which is primarily ready activities, audit services, program promotion, and liability insurance, these are the only areas where the expenditures are running in excess of the plan. The audit, program promotion, liability categories aren't a concern to be running ahead because their expenditures tend to be concentrated in certain months throughout the year. And in fact, in some categories, they've even exceeded their budget, but the year-end accounting accruals that we do will bring them back into alignment. The board development area is under discussion tonight. I see elsewhere on the agenda. It's an area to closely monitor just because we're running a little strong in that category. Overall, we need to see the expenditures increase rather dramatically to finish out the year in alignment with the plan. Most of the areas where we're far under budget are capital expenditures, which we were avoiding doing last fall because of the delay in tax revenues, but we do need to get those done before the year ends to avoid having problems in the development of next year's budget for the appropriations of the levy ordinance. To not hit our target could potentially reduce property tax revenue available to the district over a long-term basis. That's the importance of making that. On the revenue side,
Jerry?
year-to-date revenue, yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
that's okay.
Could we maybe have Brian just address this, the last point to the board about spending for the rest of the fiscal year?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Brian, you with us?
Yes, I am. We have the big items that are on the budget, capital project fund and things of that nature. We have about $100,000, $113,000 to spend in those projects, and the numbers are in. We just haven't approved them yet as a staff. So that will be spent before I leave, most of it by May 31st. We also have truck, which we're going to talk about later, in the $40,000 range. And if the Kubota comes in, that's $25,000. So there'll be plenty of money spent.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the rest of the fiscal year? You have a plan?
What's that?
You're comfortable with our spending for the rest of the fiscal year?
Yeah. We'll be fine. In fact, if there's a problem in May, we just slow down, and Jerry and I discuss that every May. So.
Thank you.
And Brian and I met earlier this week for a few hours to go over what's on the plans for the coming months. And I'm in agreement with Brian. He's got a plan of attack for it all. A number of the items are coming up for discussion.
Great. Thank you.
On the revenue side, our revenue's running a little lower than it was at this same point last year. Program revenues are actually running a bit ahead of plan. Tax revenues are about 70,000 behind, but that's probably because we're not receiving yet the first installment for 2022 property tax bills, because Cook County delayed them a month to give folks a little relief from having paid the final 2021 tax installment so late in the year. I expect by next month's meeting we'll have a real positive report on the revenue picture. Overall cash flow wise, we've spent 61,000 more than has been received in revenues. Our budget goal is to arrive at a final shortfall of 119,000, which means we're using up some of our reserves and unspent money from last year. Just in order to achieve that, it just emphasizes the importance that we've got to stay on track getting the remaining projects for this fiscal year done as planned. On the cash and investment side, our Chase relationship was just a little bit over FDIC. I intended for it to be under the FDIC limit, but late in the month, a little bit more revenue came in than we were expecting from various little odds and ends. But Chase has made the usual arrangements for collateral to be held at the New York Fed in accordance with state law. I did transfer $120,000 out of the Chase relationship into the Wintrust and Illinois Funds relationships to bring down the big balance that we had at the end of last month. And I'll be monitoring it again in April as we start to receive tax revenues in again. We still have not restored to the investment accounts the balances that were there at the beginning of the year that were drawn down due to the delays in tax revenues, but we're rapidly topping up the tank, so to speak, again. On the unresolved outstanding items, I go into a little more discussion than usual here just to highlight the two categories. There's approved unresolved items and there's unapproved items. On the approved items, these are things that you, the board, have voted to authorize, yet for some reason the payments have not come out of our bank accounts yet. Sometimes it's the recipient of the money has lost the check or had some processing handling problem on their end. Other times it's an error on our part, and once in a while there's an error at the bank. Regardless, they need attention to make sure that we're adhering to the state laws regarding unclaimed property and prompt payment by public funds. These aren't as urgent as the unapproved items, but the urgency to them is that it gets more difficult the more time passes, that they remain unresolved. And with the unclaimed property, there's things that kick in where we have to turn the money over to the state and go through a lot of extra stuff. We're nowhere near hitting the deadlines for those kind of things, so I'm not terribly concerned. But I just wanted to spend a moment explaining what that category is all about and why you hear about it from me every month. Office staff has made some progress on the outstanding items in this category, and they're continuing to work on the oldest items. I've got confidence that Sean is going to be able to get those cleared up in a timely manner. Unapproved items are those which have somehow cleared our bank accounts, but never came before you as a board to approve of. They need priority attention because there's not supposed to be any expenditures that haven't been approved by the board first. Fraud is a possible concern in this category. And our policies require that unapproved entries older than 2 board meetings have to have board attention and action to either immediately resolve them or approve the write-off as a loss. In this category, we frequently have petty cash items. They kind of fall in a bit of a fuzzy gray area. I call, they're unapproved technically, but you've given a blanket approval of a fixed dollar amount for Brian to administer each month on petty cash. So those, it's usually just a timing issue. They got spent out of petty cash. They'll be approved on the next month's bills. But a few of them fall in the crack. This month we have 2 items that are related to each other. They need a board motion to resolve them. And therefore, I've got the recommendation for a motion in my report that the payment of $189.80 to IMRF that was approved on the general bills report of January 2023 be instead approved for $189.90 to clear the outstanding unapproved general bank account entry for that amount. This is just basically a clerical error where it got put on the bills report for the wrong approval amount. That's the end of my report. I'd ask that that motion be adopted.
Morel makes a motion to approve the expenditure for IMRF to change the amount to $189.90 as shown in this month's treasurer's report as dated January 31st, 2023.
Mitchell seconds. Is there any board discussion on that issue? Natalie, could we vote, please?
Braun,
Yes.
Anton,
Yes.
Morel,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Right, motion carries. And Ms. Ali, we'll stay with you for your report.
All right. Our Garden to Table program has begun. The class is sold out at 13 gardeners this season. We added 3 additional beds to the Ridgeville Garden that are being rented to class alumni for the season. We received a very generous bed donation from Sandra Madison, so big thank you to her. So that meant our crew didn't have to build 2 of the 3 new beds, which is awesome. Also, thank you to Marcos and Felipe. They did a terrific job of removing one of the benches from the garden this week and bringing those beds from Elks to Ridgeville, which I know was really hard work for them. So I really appreciate that. Elks Park Community Garden. We have a total of 35 gardeners at Elks this season. I was able to get our wait list down to 3 people, which is very exciting. Since I wrote this report, I have had a few reach out, so it has grown just a bit. But that was a huge dent that we were able to make in the season by turning those larger plots into micro plots as they were returned to us. Additionally, we still have 2 plots dedicated to the Youth Grow team for donation to the local food pantries. The season has started, but we're waiting for some warmer weather to get in there and make those bed accommodations until. Laura Downey is our interim urban agricultural supervisor for the year. In addition to taking over the Youth Grow Team program, she's also coordinating with volunteers to assist our maintenance team in prepping elks for the season and do our annual park beautification. Studio 908 spring classes begin on March 19th and they run through May 27th. We will take the week of April 2nd through the 8th off for our spring break camp at Ridgeville Park. Our youth classes are filling very quickly and adult classes are coming along. Spring break camp is happening at the community house April 3rd through the 7th from 9 to 4 with extended care being offered. This camp is offered a la carte and most days are already at capacity or very, very close. We are fully staffed. We have some returning camp counselors and then a few of our new summer staff are going to be starting in the spring to kind of get a head start on their camp counselor careers. And then Josh Cavaliers is returning as our camp director for this spring break camp session. Summer camp, the first round of our summer camp registration opened on February 20th. That was for Ridgeville Park District residents who met special criteria. This initial opening went very well. The next round will open on Monday, on March 13th for everybody. I will continue to hold a few spots for the late season scholarship requests and our TED Fund recipients. And then one more thing I didn't have in my report, I did hire a typist who is typing our general ordinance. Very excited. That will be done by the end of this month.
That's great. And now that's going to be digitized?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm going to work with her to, once it's online, I'll be able to like hot link pages of minutes into things so people can access that very easily. I'm hoping we can create a like a table of contents in the beginning that can hot link to the different pages of the document so you don't have to scroll through. And obviously this will make it much, much easier in the future if we need to make policy changes or change the ordinance and add things. Charles.
Hi.
Hi.
When we do that, I'm going to suggest to the board that we pass a new revised general ordinance, which will be whatever's being prepared now. And if there are any other changes to the ordinance that may come up through the Ready Committee process that's going forward. As long as we're having it retyped, we should just have one ordinance and we shouldn't, it'll supersede the prior ordinance, general ordinances, which are 40 years old and then amended 4 years ago. So I think it's appropriate to do it at this time.
Charles, can I ask a question about that? I'm going to be working with the typist about those, you know, when there's been edits made or addendums or whatnot, it has been just marked on the PDF document and then those minutes have been included in the back of it. If she's going to type that portion of the minutes into the general ordinance, does it need to be the entire, all the minutes or just the portion with which we talked about the thing that's changing?
So we're not going to need any more minutes. We're going to pass this as the new general ordinance, whatever we call it, revised, new general ordinance, restated, etc. And once we do that, the board will sign. We'll have a nice copy that you can post, and we don't need to worry about the old ordinance. It'll just be a historical artifact.
Okay, great. So that means I have permission to actually edit and change things, change it within the ordinance itself to make adjustments for those things that have been passed, and then we'll just pass the whole thing.
I think it's best if we talk about this offline.
Great. Okay.
But yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your help on that, Charles. Natalie, do you have anything further?
Nope, that's it.
Oh, thank you. Does anybody, commissioners, have questions or comments for Ms. Salee?
Natalie, those 3 people on the wait list, or how, so, and then obviously there's more, the people that have added since then have clearly only been on the wait list a few days or weeks. The 3 that were remaining, how long have they been on it?
Just since like towards the end of last season.
So not long at all. Anybody waiting a year or longer?
Not anymore.
Got
No,
it.
I was able to get all
Got
of them off.
Great.
And I have communicated with everybody. They know what's going on. And that I will reach out to them. Sometimes people leave mid-season, you know, they move or can't, you know, decide they can't deal with the plot. So if something changes within the summer, I'll move more gardeners in there, but I've communicated with them.
Great. I think, I think moving forward, I think we can still continue to explore more garden plots because clearly it's something that the public wants. But I just want to thank you for, for your hard work on this, because it seems, I know we had some outreach from the public about wanting more spots, and I think we and you did a really good job answering that and taking care of that and seeing that anybody that wanted one did. So thank you for that.
Sure.
All right, anything else for Natalie? All right, moving on to Ms. Harmon and the Ready report.
Hi there. All right, so we have been working on the ordinances. From the board report, our focus area addressed was Dr. Pat Effiam, the Ridgeville Park District's previous equity consultant, had identified items in the general ordinance to be edited. The statement of impact is, as it's stated in Dr. Effiam's report, and I quote recommendation number 2, update the sections of the ordinance that might be discriminatory, sufficiently vague to allow subjectivity, or assumptive of social norms or cultural contexts that are not inclusive to all demographics or constituents. And the recommended resolution listed below are the sections of the general ordinance flagged by Effiam and Associates as needed to be updated. Aisha Robinson, Ridgeville Park District's current equity consultant, has created a format with guidelines to be used in the editing process, which was provided with the previous board report last month. Each committee member was assigned an ordinance or 2 and edited the ordinance in accordance with the aforementioned guidelines. These edits were reviewed at the Ready meeting on February 16th, then discussed by Commissioner Mitchell and Ms. Herman. All remaining questions have been passed on to the Park District's Executive Director, Mr. Rosinski, to be reviewed by Mr. Valente, the Park District's attorney. So in general, there were 2 major categories that the changes fell into. Although the committee is not yet ready to make a formal recommendation, there were 2 main topics to address. The first is differentiating between permits and reservations, such as in section 6.0 and 6.05. This is similar to what happened with the barbecue policy of changing that word permit to reservation. Essentially, a person will require a reservation to save space for a personal event, and a business would need a permit to be able to conduct business on Park District property. Once the ordinance has been digitized, which I am also super excited about, the committee will determine which sections need to be revised to reflect these changes and make an official recommendation to the board. As we went through, there are multiple places where this idea of permit and reservations come up. So we want to make sure we have that comprehensive list to bring to you as a formal recommendation. The second thing that we noticed was or that we're hoping is that there's a possibility of removing any language that speaks to criminal activity on the Park District property. Not only do ordinances like these get used disproportionately against marginalized communities, the Park District does not have any way to enforce them. In the event there was a criminal act, the Evanston Police Department would be the ones to come, and they would be using, state and city laws, which take priority over the ordinances of the Park District, and are pretty much in line from what we kind of peaked at. So I don't know, Charles, if you want to make your comment here before we go into the specific one about section 6.02.
Yeah, I want to be clear about this. Currently, the only criminal prohibition in the code is one that deals with bribery of Park District officials. There is nothing else that's criminal. There are prohibitions there, but they are not criminal. So they cannot be, there's nothing in our general ordinance that allows a criminal remedy to be pursued.
So even with the right, like there's the one about I think the term that was used was panhandling, and there's the other one with the I don't have it right in front of me.
Tracy, you and I had this conversation, and remember, this is when I kind of introduced the idea of quasi-criminal.
Right.
That these are not actual criminal offenses, but they're prohibitive and could be enforced, but it wouldn't go on it's not a criminal matter.
The only way they can be enforced currently is if the Park District decides to sue someone civilly and seek an injunction to stop them from doing something, which realistically, I don't foresee happening. The amount of legal fees involved in that are too much for the Park District. So it would have to be something huge.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, is it something that can be removed without causing the Park District extra liability?
There's nothing to remove. All we have is a prohibition on panhandling, period. If somebody does it, they're violating our rules, but there's nothing that can happen to them that the Park District can do unless the Park District wants to pursue a civil lawsuit saying, hey, you're violating our rules.
So from the legal standpoint, I get it, right? Like there's not, again, like it's not going to be enforced. From an equity standpoint, just even having that language in there, I think could be viewed as problematic. So if that language did not exist in the ordinance, would that be a problem?
For me, no, but I mean, that's up to the commissioners.
Right.
They may decide that, you know what, whether we're going to enforce it or not, there should be a rule against panhandling. It's up to them.
Okay, so there's
that's the area that the committee is looking for to pull out those specific ordinances, because there are ordinances where their enforcement from the Park District would lean heavily towards policing, for lack of a better term, of marginalized communities. And so those are the portions that the committee is looking for to pull out from the ordinance. But it's what the question was, if we pull those out, are there things that needed to be in the ordinances around some of those sections?
I mean, that's a question for the commissioners. They make those decisions. I would think a prohibition on intoxication in the park is something that they would want to keep, whether it's enforceable or not, whether it's criminally enforceable or not. That would be appropriate. There's children in the parks, there's other people in the parks, there is a safety issue. I think it's appropriate to have a rule against intoxication. But again, it's not my decision. I would recommend it, but the commissioners have to vote on that and make a decision on what they want the rules to be.
And that's where some of the ordinances, when you think about how do you determine if someone is intoxicated, it leaves, and who's responsible to do that. That's where some of the ordinances leaves room for inequitable practices and discrimination.
So
So that's where the,
I understand what you're saying. My recommendation would be that there should be a rule on this. The Park District Commissioner should examine the prior history of what's gone on over the last 10, 20, 30 years. And if there are issues with that, then they need to think about ways to be specific about it. But if there haven't been issues, what's the likelihood that issues will come up? That's for them to decide, not me.
And so my understanding then, at this point, the Ready Committee is discussing making a recommendation to the board.
right. And this piece
Not
of
there yet.
information was the portion of information we needed to know. Of given the recommendations that we make, are there any ordinances that we're identifying that we would recommend to be removed that would legally need to be there or need to be there for some other reason?
So my recommendation to the board would be that I meet with the Ready Committee or just go over what changes they want to make with them in some other fashion if necessary. And I give them my thoughts and they make their recommendation. That's my recommendation.
Sounds perfectly reasonable to me. Any other commissioners have thoughts on that? Okay. So can we do that going forward, JC and Aisha?
Yes, I think that would be incredibly helpful.
Great.
Yes, agreed.
Any further discussion? JC, I see you have an action item. Oh, actually, do you have anything else in your report?
Just to kind of finish it out, right? There's Charles had already made comment reference to the section 6.02, the alcoholic liquors. The second part of that, which we'll talk to Charles about just because it's in, the report, is in there, it says that you can obtain a permit to serve alcoholic liquors on Park District property, but that's not something that currently happens. So whether or not that should be removed, or if the Park District wants that option moving forward, if it should remain. I just wanted to remind everybody that the recommendations that Dr. Effiam and Associates had made is they did not do a comprehensive overview of the ordinances. So that's something that we are looking to do in terms of making sure that everything is in alignment with the Park District's commitment to equity.
Great.
Thank you.
Any commissioners have anything further for JC? Okay, and then JC, on the agenda, I also see a recommendation of an appointment.
Yes, thank you so much. So we have unfortunately lost a member. Elaine Siegel has stepped off the committee. Her plate is a little bit too full for her to be able to give the kind of attention that she wanted to. But we have also gained a member. Mark I spoke with him a few weeks ago. I believe a lot of you know him from he had interviewed for the board position. And he is interested in being on the committee. So I was hoping you all would officially appoint him.
So I'll go ahead and make that motion. I move that the board appoints Mark Carlin to the Ready Committee going forward.
I'll second. Merle second.
Any discussion or questions on that? Okay, can we vote on it, Natalie?
Braun,
Yes.
Anton,
Yes.
Morel,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Rogers.
Yes.
Right, motion carries. Thank
Hey,
you.
Thank you so much. I think he's going to be a great addition.
Matt, can I make a quick comment, just so everybody knows, the ordinance that we're discussing about revising in different sections was written by a previous board in 1988, July of 1988. So nobody here was here in 1988. We all were here, but we weren't working at Ridgeville or a commissioner at Ridgeville. So Just want to make that clear.
Thank you. All right, we're done with our monthly reports. We don't have any old business, and so we will move on to new business. Item agenda 10A1 is discussing the F-250 bid. Brian, could you talk us through that?
Yeah, it might be better for you to authorize the $40,000 first, and then I could talk about the F-250.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Sure, and then we'll talk about it and then vote on it. So Mitchell moves to authorize a $40,000 fund transfer from the recreation fund to capital projects planned per the appropriations and levy ordinances. Is there a second?
Morel second.
And then we'll get into the discussion. Brian, do you want to talk us through what's
Sure.
been going on?
As you know, the F-250 was put out the bid, and the bids were due back on February 23rd of 2023. We received one bid from Breedham and Ford in Glenview. Breedham is the auto dealer where we purchased our last 3 trucks. The bid came back at $49,000, which is $9,000 more than we budgeted in the C600 Capital Projects Fund line item. In discussing this situation with Treasurer Gibbs and Breedham and Ford, it appears the F-250 will not be delivered by our budget year end 6/30/23. Breedham has confirmed they will hold the truck for us if it happens to come in before the budget year ends. Therefore, if you approve this purchase, we will need to include 2 additional expenses in next year's budget. One is $9,000 additional money that would be in the capital fund, and the other is the cost of the plow for this vehicle, which we don't know what that number is, but we'll find that out and put it in next year's budget. So that's where the vehicle sits. And in doing a little minor research, vehicles are outrageous. I mean, it's a mess. And the delays on everything is basically what I'm told is computer chips. So that's why the Kubota is delayed and the supply chain problems. But at any rate, the vehicle is needed, and your current F-250 will die very soon. It's not going to make it.
And Brian, could you explain to us why we need to transfer the $40,000 from recreation to capital?
I'm sorry? It's
Why is it
from
necessary?
It's okay, I'll jump in on that one.
Yeah.
Each year when we do the budget, if we are running a project out of the capital fund, we take unspent money from a prior year in either the corporate or the recreation fund and transfer it to the capital fund to provide the monies for that particular project. When we passed the levy ordinance in December, we did not also pass a motion authorizing the transfer to preserve that money. We had previously done that at the end of the last fiscal year, anticipating the nature-based play area. We at that point in time didn't have the number for the truck in the budget, but as time's progressed, we got it. So we just needed to get that done before the fiscal year ends. We should have done it a couple months ago. We haven't spent the money yet, so it's still time to do it, but that's the purpose of that motion.
Thank you. Any commissioners have any questions or comments? All right, there is a pending motion. Ms. Larson has joined us. Julie, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Ron,
Yes.
Morel, Anton,
Yes.
Morel,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
and Rogers.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to.
We need a motion to approve the $49,000 bid so I can go to Breedham and order the truck.
Okay.
So
Mitchell moves to approve $49,000 to be spent on a new F-250 with Breedeman Ford. Is there a second?
Yeah, Morel seconds.
Any questions, comments? Julie, can we vote on that, please?
Braun,
Yes.
Anton,
Yes.
Morel,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
and Rogers. Matt Rogers,
Yes, sorry, I have trouble unmuting.
thank you.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to new business 10B, for action to discuss and approve the draft scholarship policy. So I'll go ahead and make the motion, and then we can talk about it. Mitchell moves to accept and approve the draft scholarship policy that is included in this month's packet.
Morel seconds.
Natalie, do you want to talk us through it?
Sure. So Matt, Mitchell, and I had discussed this a while ago, our need for some kind of scholarship policy. As you all know, we offer pretty extensive scholarships to our community when they need them for various camps and classes and whatnot. And currently there's not any real guidance for this. We kind of operate on an ask and receive basis. As we have seen our programs grow, the need for scholarships have grown, and especially after with COVID and the pandemic. So it creates a little bit of chaos in the office for Jung, tracking all of that for Brian and I to decide who gets what and how much. So anyway, I had approached Matt a while back about creating some kind of policy for us to use as a guideline. So to put this together, Matt and I had met and spoke about what the city of Evanston does for their scholarship policy, what documents they use to verify residency and income. And so we structured this pretty closely to how the city of Evanston does their own scholarship policy, but with our own, but with some accommodations for folks that live outside of district, since we do have a pretty large base of folks who use our programs who are out of district and do request scholarships. I then took this to and Matt worked on this, put it together. I took it to the Ready Committee. The Ready Committee looked over it, made some suggestions. We sent it to Charles. He took a look at it too. So the draft policy that you have in front of you is has been looked over by quite a few people, and I think is ready to talk about tonight. Anything you wanted to add about that?
No, I don't have anything right now. Are there any questions, comments from board members? I would just say as an overview, it gets tied to the federal poverty guidelines, and also, which is also used for free and reduced school lunch. So that's kind of the base that we used, state of Illinois, District 65, how they determine need. And that gets updated every year, the federal poverty guidelines. So that would be the current federal poverty guideline would be the base, and that changes annually.
I will say one other big change about this policy from what we do now. It creates a structure for people to request a scholarship annually. So as opposed to every time they fill out a registration form having to ask for a scholarship, that then comes to us, it has to be approved. Jung has to send an email, we have to track that. It's a kind of a one and done annual application, and then it's applicable to everybody in the household for the year, and then the next year they would apply again for that assistance. It offers up to 50% scholarship to in-district patrons and up to 25% discount to out-of-district patrons. And then based on if there's more need than that, it can be assessed at that point. But so those are really the biggest changes we're looking at from how we're operating now.
Are these the same documents for residency that we would require regardless of scholarship, right? Like if somebody's just trying to sign up for camp and you are asking for proof of residency, because I know our prices are lower for residents than non. Are these the same documents that people are able to give for that?
We don't require documentation to prove that.
Okay.
When they fill out a registration form, they have to put their address in, and then we ask if they're a resident or not and show them the boundaries on the form. So,
Okay.
So we don't currently ask for documentation on that.
Okay.
Charles, you're on mute.
Charles, you're muted.
To be clear, we are putting in here accepted documents for verification of residency. Which
Yeah.
presumes that we will be doing that when people ask for a scholarship.
Yes.
The other thing, which maybe I missed something, but I think you might have misstated. I thought that the scholarship was set percentages, whether in district or out of district, and that was it. You seem to suggest that there could be additional scholarship beyond that in case of need, and I don't recall that.
That was a line that I had added.
I know specifically
when you made your edit.
it's folks that are at or below the poverty level can perhaps petition for additional scholarship.
So at the bottom of policy here, there's a line that says review of eligibility for additional assistance or payment extension may be offered in special circumstances. Scholarship award balances should be paid in full before the start of the desired program, and the Park District may arrange a payment plan if requested by the grantee.
So I would suggest that that's not entirely clear on what you're trying to do. I also think that you should be careful because that may be putting too much discretion in the individual's hands.
Okay. If we are using their income verification and this guide, the federal.
So my concern is I don't know what these special circumstances are. I know if somebody's meeting the federal guideline or not, that can be looked at and somebody can figure that out. You know, it's one thing for the board to consider special circumstances, but it's another thing for an employee of the board to be making those determinations. So I have some concern about that, that it's just not defined well as to what special circumstances are.
So this is something that came up in our READY committee meeting when we reviewed this there. The concern that they brought up was, what if their verification of income indicates that they would be eligible for a 50% scholarship, but there's other circumstances in their life which mean they can't actually pay the 50%. Is it possible that somebody could receive more than 50% if the circumstances seem to call for it? So that was like the impetus behind that addition.
So I'm all in favor of policy because everybody knows what the policy is and the decisions can be made in compliance with the policy, and it takes most of the decision work out of the board's hands, so they don't need to worry about it. It'll just happen.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about special circumstances, you know, I don't know if the special circumstances are they didn't buy a new car this year, or if the special circumstances are that everybody in the family has been ill all year. And it seems to me that once you get past these poverty guidelines and you're talking about special circumstances, that really is something that shouldn't be in a policy. It really should be something the board decides. That's my opinion. The board can decide I'm wrong and do it this way, but I think it's a lot to delegate.
Okay. So do you recommend striking that line? Review of eligibility for additional assistance or payment extension may be offered in special circumstances? Take out that entire sentence?
I think if you want to do anything, you could provide that after a scholarship determination, people are free to petition the board for, particular accommodation in particular circumstances.
Okay. What do you think?
So
Should
I'm on board with Charles's recommendation. I'm happy to try to approve this tonight, just because we're getting into the time where summer scholarships come into play. I'm happy to make that change. I would suggest 2 other changes.
Okay.
On page 25 of the digital packet is page 2 of the application of the draft scholarship policy. There's 2 sections, in-district eligibility and out-of-district eligibility. So in-district eligibility, paragraph 3 states, in-district households with an annual household income at or below the federal poverty guidelines will be eligible for a 50% scholarship towards Ridgeville Park District programming fees. I would leave it at that and strike the and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And that language is also mirrored in paragraph 3 of the out-of-district.
Got it.
And so I would strike everything from and.
Okay. And then to confirm, on the first page of the policy at the bottom, I will leave, to be eligible to receive a scholarship, the grantee household must pay all previous balances owed to the Park District. I'll strike the next sentence and then keep scholarship award balances should be paid in full before the start of the desired program. The Park District may arrange a payment plan if requested by the grantee.
I agree.
Do I need to add a sentence here about petitioning the board, or would you prefer we just leave that out?
Personally, I'm ambivalent. I'm happy to leave it out and have staff know that if somebody wants to make a petition, that's the recourse. The remedy is to petition the board.
That was going to be my suggestion. I think leave it out and just Brian and the program director, everybody's aware that it's an option. And if you are aware of a family that is applying for scholarships and, might have an issue paying that, say, okay, that we can petition the board and go that route as well.
Okay.
Charles, do you have an opinion about that?
I think that's a reasonable approach to deal with the situation.
Okay.
Okay. Where and how would you make sure to document that in the event that everyone who's here may not be a part of that process, so that it's clear that that's a part of this process? That's just something to make sure that you make sure it's documented somewhere.
Thank you, Aisha. So I agree. So this is going to be the policy that the decision makers, which right now are the program director and the executive director, this is the policy that they're going to use going forward. What is our safeguard to know that they're aware that if additional relief is wanted, that there is a process.
I think Aisha is talking about just transparency and accessibility, that folks know that that's an option to them beyond just talking to us. And I say that because that was the conversation that was had at the Ready Committee meeting. I'm sorry, Aisha, I didn't mean to speak for you. I just wanted to clarify what we had.
Oh, yes,
talked about.
yes.
I'm comfortable with our official policy being we offer scholarships up to 50%. If someone wants to petition for additional scholarship money, I don't know. Aisha, are you suggesting maybe we put something in the policy itself?
Right, so that people are just, there's no room for any sort of interpretation, questioning, and that people across the board, when they have access or see any of these things, know the complete process from start and end, and know how to follow the rules for any exceptions.
I'm comfortable putting in a sentence that if special circumstances warrant additional scholarship, the recipient can petition the board with their special circumstances.
Does this sound okay? Applicants may petition the Board of Commissioners directly if additional assistance is desired? Or
Yeah, could we add special circumstances?
oh, sure.
Not to,
So I'm going to suggest, why don't we say applicants can petition the board directly for additional relief if they believe special circumstances apply to their case. And
Got
I
it.
probably said that way too fast for you to write down.
I got it.
Okay.
Hey, Matt,
Yes.
a word we used to use 2 boards ago, maybe 3 boards ago, was extenuating circumstances instead of special. I don't know if you want to use that word. And then what you passed tonight, when does it start? Because I would make a suggestion that it starts for summer camps and not for the rest of the class session. But that's just my suggestion.
Any other thoughts on that, Madeline?
Charles, I missed the last word. Relief if they believe extenuating circumstances apply to their, what was the last word you said? Needs?
Circumstances?
was it?
Situation?
Yeah. Situation or
Circumstances, I think, would be
circumstances?
appropriate. And I agree with Brian that it is appropriate to have an effective date.
And Brian, I heard what you said. Do you have a specific calendar date in mind?
Brian, may I say something about that? I think Brian's great. I think that was correct what he said. If it could go into effect immediately for summer camps only, and then apply to all programming as of the July 1st fiscal year, 2023 fiscal year for all programs.
It's a lot of work for a $35 scholarship request for a class. That's just my opinion.
So for this will apply immediately towards summer programming or just summer camp? Natalie?
Only summer camp through the end of this current fiscal year, and then beginning on July 1st, it would apply to all Ridgeville Park District programs.
I'm right with that.
I have a quick question about the application to the board. So if that's the process, obviously that has to be built into any timelines. And also, would that be discussed in open sessions?
I think it would have to. I don't think it.
I think it would have to too. I'm interested in trying to shield people from having their laundry aired in a public forum.
Yeah, so anything that happens is public and people could get their hands on it and things can be submitted and reviewed. If it goes before the board, it's going to be a public session. There's just no two ways about that. If
Right.
it doesn't go through the board, then it's just a question of whether somebody seeks a Freedom of Information Act request on it, or if the board decides to review what was done last April to see if it's consistent with the policy. So that would all be public information that would come out at a board meeting. The public has the right to know that.
The public does have the right to know, but us airing it in a public meeting versus somebody having to FOIA the information is a very different situation.
Yeah, but it's only going to be a public meeting if somebody seeks particular relief beyond the program that's there.
Correct. And those are the people who have the extenuating circumstances, who are the people who are the most vulnerable to this. So that's my concern on it. I don't really have a dog in this fight. I'm just making that.
Yeah, so I
point.
want to be clear about this. This isn't a question that you get to decide. The Illinois State Legislature has decided that if this comes before the board, it will be at a public meeting.
And I'm not arguing that aspect of it. I'm arguing, should it come before the board?
That's up to you to decide, but the alternative is that under this policy, there wouldn't be any other relief unless they went to the board.
Under the amended policy, the policy
Right.
in the packet as written envisions more, Matt, leaving the discretion to the staff.
Right. No, I get all of that. I'm just saying I want to raise the point that if you're asking people to submit an application to the board, it's going to be aired in a public meeting.
Yeah. So do you have a preference of delegating it to staff, or?
I think you could do a delegation to staff with like one board member as an advisor or something, because that wouldn't require OMA qualifications or anything.
Charles looks like he hates it.
Yeah, I mean, you're setting up a super board person who gets to make decisions that the other board members don't make. And, you know, either you delegate it to your staff with specific guidelines and they can make those determinations, or you reserve it for yourself to do at board meetings. And I understand that people may not want to disclose certain situations to the public at large, but the public at large does have a right to know how their tax dollars are being spent. And if special accommodations are being made for some individuals, that it's appropriate.
Can I offer an alternative? Is delegate to staff, use the policy as written, and add any award given outside of the written policy will be reported to the entire board by email. You know, I mean, I think the benefit of not delegating to staff discretion is super clear policy that's you know, enforced equally across the board. I think Commissioner Rogers brought up a good point that, you know, it's a sensitive subject that, you know, some, not secrecy, but privacy could be acknowledged.
what if a form was created for them to fill out, describing their circumstances as well as the other scholarship application, and Natalie or Brian or whoever's in the position emails form to the board can reply back. And I don't know if this is legal, Charles, or not, but the board could reply back yes or no, whether or not they would be in favor or against the providing extra help, for lack of a better term. And it could just move forward like that. So it wouldn't even go to a meeting. It would just be done through email.
So let me suggest that what we might want to do here is talk to the staff and find out what situations have come up in the past where they felt like there were special circumstances that would exceed the percentages here, and that was appropriate or not. Is this a problem that's really being faced, or are we just kind of speculating on something that may come up?
I think it will come up. And the reason I say that, but you have to remember, we don't have any kind of policy around this right now. So we ask on the form currently, how much is the total cost of the programs you've selected? How much of that are you able to contribute? And can you tell us anything about your financial circumstances? And that's it. So the program itself might cost $400 and they tell us they can pay $50. And so we decide if that's okay or not. Sometimes it is. If there's a lot of registration in that program and it has floated the program in such a way that we can afford to offer a larger scholarship like that. But sometimes we can't, and they'll request maybe a 75% scholarship and all we can offer them is 50%. So it's really done on a case-by-case basis, and also by how much registration we have for the program that they're asking for currently. So yes, it will probably come up specifically for, I think, people who are used to telling us how much they can pay and then that being all right. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't know if it will be, I don't know how new people come to the Park District registering for programs, how that will affect them and their request for this additional assistance.
It might also be appropriate to enact the policy and see how it goes, and then make changes the next time around.
That was going to be my suggestion, that maybe for this round, we empower staff. And I would say it would be the park director and the program director in conjunction. So it's not resting on one person solely.
Mm-hmm.
And then if in the future this proves to be problematic, or the board doesn't feel that it's being managed the way the board would like to see it managed, then we can take whatever steps are necessary. But at least that gets the program up and running, and we don't have to worry about the issue of people's personal financial information being shared in public forums.
Yeah.
I'm all right with that.
I'm okay with that too. Hey, I would just maybe ask that in order to keep it transparent with us, and just, so we can keep an eye on this, just anytime that does happen, Natalie, not that you have to share any of their names, but just keep us updated in your monthly report, when you're doing this and the amount and that type of thing. And maybe with the entire program, right? With all the scholarships and then anything further as well.
Sure. So can I just ask, can I keep the edits that I made on the second page and strike the "and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis"? Keep that out, but change the sentence that we had just added to "applicants can petition the executive director directly for additional relief if they believe extenuating circumstances apply," so that there is a line about what to do if you have extenuating circumstances, and then we'll see how it goes. Is that where we're at with that?
All right with that.
And then one other quick edit on the second page under application process. It says the director of recreation. Can I just change that to executive director, just for consistency?
Yes, please.
Got it.
Hey, Matt.
So Natalie, make sure that's what we're using in the general ordinance. If we're saying executive director there, make sure that's in the general ordinance. I thought it was director of recreation, but.
Just-
I mean, I think
Just so you guys know, especially with summer scholarship applications, Natalie and I will sit down in the conference room and go through them one by one. It's not a single person decision. And in the past, most of the extenuating circumstances have been obviously income related, job loss, things of that nature, or illness, serious illness that has affected the whole family. Those are the two majors.
The plan, if this passes and we're able to apply it to summer camps this year, I haven't, normally we reach out to folks right away when they apply for those things. And I have let them know that we're having these conversations. So I will be able to email everybody that has applied for a scholarship with the new policy and how to come into the office to get it all, to get their annual scholarship application up and rolling. So it will be a good, I mean, summer camp is kind of a big one for it to be like a trial thing, but I'll be able to apply it and hopefully it will go smoothly.
Any other discussion? So there is a pending motion. I would move to amend that motion to include the updated language that we've discussed. And Natalie, could you walk us through the changes from the original document in the packet?
Sure. So on the first page, under policy, I have struck the line review of eligibility for additional assistance or payment extension may be offered in special circumstances. I have added the line applicants can petition the executive director directly for additional relief if they believe extenuating circumstances apply. On the second page, I have under application process, I have changed director of recreation to executive director. In district eligibility, I have struck the last part of the sentence and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis to see if scholarship assistance is available. And out of district eligibility, I've struck the same sentence and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis to see if more scholarship assistance is available.
That's great. So my motion is to amend the application policy in the packet to include Natalie's amendments. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All right. Julie, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Yep. Braun,
Yes.
Anton,
Agreed.
Morale,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
and Rogers.
Yes.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for stewarding this, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you all for passing this. This is going to be very helpful.
Brian, could you talk us through item 10C, approving extending the equity consultant contract?
Sure. As I've mentioned in previous board meetings, we are now slightly over budget on our equity consultant contract. The contract is for $10,000 through June 30th, 2023. As of this writing, we are at $10,250 spent. Board President Mitchell has spoken with Aisha Robinson and discussed what it would cost to finish this year's budget of equity. That number is an additional $5,000. The equity contract is a subset of board development appropriations in the budget CA 21. Review of that budget reveals the board has not utilized $4,000 of the funds designated for conferences and other board development activities. these are funds available to be redirected. These funds are available to be redirected to equity outreach category, which is $1,000 short of the $5,000 request we would need to be deferred to the next year's budget. So in simple language, we have $4,000 in CA 21.
And Brian, you're looking for authorization to allocate that towards equity. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what's that?
So you're asking for the board to allocate that unused $4,000 towards equity outreach category.
Right, keep it going for as long as possible
So
through this budget year.
Mitchell moves to instruct the executive director to redirect $4,000 from CA 21 to be redirected towards the equity outreach category of board development.
Anton second.
Morrell seconds.
Is there any discussion?
Can I ask how we are so over on budget? I mean, we started late on this, and because we didn't hire at the beginning of our year, and we're talking about a 50% increase in this particular item. So I'm just curious where the overages come from.
The overage in equity?
Yeah.
The 10,250?
No. So the request, so we had budgeted $10,000, and we're looking at a 50% increase in what was allocated. We started working with Aisha in September,
August.
Okay, I couldn't remember exactly when. And so I'm just curious why we are looking at an increase of 50% at this point, when we're still got 3 months left in this year.
Correct.
So I can say one issue we have is that we had our hiccup with Dr. Logan, where we got in an impasse on a consultant contract and ended up paying him, I thought, about $1,500 without getting much for it. You have anything else, Brian?
No, I would just say you'd have to ask the equity committee exactly.
Is your father downstairs?
Yeah.
You'd have to ask the equity committee, are there too many meetings, or is there an adjustment we can make in one way, shape, or form? Because in the new budget, which I will begin to write, but the new director will finish, you're going to have to come up with a line item for this too. So there could be better planning, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess that's my other take, is that when we were allocating $10,000 last year, it was prior to us having an equity consultant, and so we were a little bit of a shot in the dark about how much we were asking for. And one of the issues, or one of the things that I'm hoping Bella Consulting can do is an hour training with our summer staff in the onboarding process. So kind of a more limited training on what our expectations are.
And our training is involved in that number also, meaning staff, full-time staff and commissioners.
I was just going to jump in and say that just this 6-hour training that Aisha had done with us, there was a lot of time put into putting that training together. And I know that expense in and of itself was maybe not something that we had foreseen or planned for when talking about the budget earlier. That was something that we had wanted to do, was to have a training that all the new staff and board members could use as a consistent training. So now we've got that, it's recorded. So that in and of itself is not an expense that I foresee us needing again in the future, at least for a while. And then additionally, like Matt had said, we are hoping that Aisha can put together a 1-hour training for camp staff, instructors, and whatnot. Again, something that we'll be able to use over and over again. So I can't speak to the rest necessarily, but that investment is a part of that, what the cost has been.
Any further questions or comment from the board? All right, there's a motion pending. Julie, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Ron,
I'm really struggling with this. I think ultimately I'm going to say no, because, and I want you to know why, because I really don't agree with going over budget. You know, it was our fault, that debacle, whatever you want to call it, with Dr. Logan. And I think it's part of the budget, you know, and I'm really opposed to going over budget on this. So I'm going to vote no.
Anton,
Yes.
Morrell,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
and Rogers.
No.
Motion carries with a 3-2 vote. Moving on to 10D. Brian, could you update us on the executive director search? And I'm happy to chime in on that as well. So I'll just get started. As you all know, we have contracted with the Illinois Association of Park Districts to lead our search for an executive director. There was a application date of February 15th. IAPD received 7 completed applications from folks who were very impressive. All 7 of those candidates were presented to the board. The board worked to narrow those candidates down to 3 candidates who we will interview in person next Monday. And after that, I believe we will try to winnow it down to a final 2 candidates for additional interviews. And we would hope to have a candidate by around the end of this month. Brian, do you have anything to add?
You pretty much covered it. We will post that meeting. That's a board meeting. You'll go into executive session to interview, which is highly recommended. And we'll just Alan Howard at IAPD is supposed to do reference checks and background checks. I think he's already done background. I assume he's done reference, but you'll have that.
He told me he was going to do criminal background or a background check prior to interviews.
Yeah. Per the contract, he's supposed to do that. So he's already done the criminal background checks. At any rate, he'll update you on that. And then second round, we would you need to communicate with me so we get that posted also as a board meeting.
For sure.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and so I envision that second round of interviews will take place this month, also in person at 908 Seward, and may include a tour of the facilities. Also,
your interviews on Monday night or Monday afternoon and evening will be in the conference room upstairs. There's a class at 7:30. They'll probably come into the building at 7. We don't want to interrupt the last interview, so we'll just start upstairs and stay upstairs.
And I also just want to state publicly, we've been real careful about this, but our current program director, Natalie Salee, is an applicant for the position, and she's been completely siloed from this process. So anything that goes through the office, we have very intentionally kept a firewall up where she's just an applicant.
So, and on Monday, the 13th, myself or Marcos Cruz will be there. We both will be there at different parts to meet the the candidate and make sure they are comfortable waiting a certain area. And then when you're available, bring them in.
Great. And I also say we have some scheduled downtime in between, so there shouldn't be overlap or too much waiting.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to be confused walking around the first floor of the building, don't know where they go.
Okay. Any commissioners have anything to add? Questions or comments? All right. Moving on to 10E. Discuss the park tour and natural playground items. Natalie, could you take this one?
Yes. Okay. We took a walk of the parks to talk about some different spaces that had come up in the past about where to place some natural playground statement pieces, if you will. So I have put together a packet for you to take a look at. So this is based on our conversations during that tour. First, I will just start off by saying we decided with this $15,000 that we have budgeted to spend before June 30th, felt like maybe Leiter Park was not an ideal location to focus putting pieces at right now. And that's mostly because our most recent play circuit is installed there. There's some other conversations going on about the Gaga pit happening at Cayman. We have a horseshoe pit that's kind of DBD or TBD. So we're talking about a water fountain. There's just a lot going on currently at Leiter Park. So felt like maybe it made sense to prioritize pieces at some other parks. We went to Reba. So currently at Reba Park, we've got 2 small mud tables and a small square table. Brian has purchased lumber, and the crew intends to build a wooden platform that can be used for seating or playing. I'm recommending an art board that could be used with mud and or tempera and chalk. I'm also recommending a log cluster or stump activity space to tie the space together and create a welcoming outdoor activity space. So here in the packet, you can see there's a log framed acrylic painting board, and that's freestanding. It's on posts. So we would put that in the ground. They do offer these that can be attached to fence lines, but we discussed that maybe that's not ideal since it's so close to a residency. Maybe it shouldn't be on the fence line. And then there's also a chalkboard. So very similar structure. It's just a matter of like, what do you want to use? Chalk or acrylic paint and or mud. So one of these 2 items I would recommend. And then the other 2 items that I have listed here are the stump activity table or the 5-piece log cluster. Since we have a, since we're putting in this like seating pad area that's being built, and we have a table over there already, I am kind of leaning towards the 5-piece log cluster to tie that in. But both are super cool. So those are my recommendations for Reba Park. Diana and
Natalie, can I ask a quick question? It's hard to see in the pictures, especially since they're sideways. What is the difference between a 5-piece log cluster and the? Because they kind of look like they're the same thing to me, but
yeah. So the 5-piece log cluster has stumps of different heights and widths, and then it also has logs. So you can, you can map it out and put it in the ground, install it however you'd like to do. So it can be used as kind of like a tightrope walking. I think there's
the log that's kind of in front there is part of that collection.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't tell if that was like in the picture that they were doing an in situ or if it was part of the actual thing.
Yeah. So the 5-piece log cluster has a variety of logs. And then the stump activity table is a large stump with like, I think 3 or 4 small stumps around it as like a table. So I think I think the log cluster lends itself to some more creative play just based on the different structure of the logs. But it's just a matter of what we want to do there. I think both would fit just fine and be a really nice addition.
Natalie, these are all just stumps.
They're stumps, but they're treated. They're treated wood,
Okay.
and they're installed into the ground, so they're not going to like topple over. It's a
Okay, so they do install them in. Okay. I guess my other question would be on the framed board or chalkboard. Especially that chalkboard. I guess I don't know. Trying to just kind of weigh costs here. I don't know how, how much like carpentry background our guys have. I guess building it from scratch, you'd probably be you'd obviously be saving quite a bit of money, but I don't know if that's worth it or something that we would want to do. Maybe Brian could speak on that. Cause like I told you before, right? Plywood with chalkboard paint is a very cost effective thing with some cedar lumber, right? Couple concrete fence posts and frame it out. But I don't know if that's something that our guys would do. And I know we also talked before about when they come out and install this stuff, they can help teach, right? And show the guys how to, our staff how to do it. So I don't know, Brian, is that something that you think they'd be able to do to save us some money and get one of these pieces, or is it even worth it?
I think they could do it. It won't look like that. I'll tell you that right now. It won't look like the picture. And I'm not sure where do you buy the actual board for that chalkboard. And then this is obviously designed to be outdoors. So
right.
The weather takes in this. Our original discussion at Riva Park was to get one of these and hang it on the fence, and or the acrylic painting board. I mean, the crew could do it, but I would suggest let's do it the right way.
Okay. Yeah, no, totally. But just a question. Yeah, and I was there. I went with Natalie to the parks, and my thought on hanging it on the fence there was just kind of encroaching on other people's property. I know. I take my kids to that park quite a bit, and I see a lot of people using that gangway too that work in that apartment, that live in that apartment building. A lot of them have dogs and that type of stuff, and I just think it would be safer and better to not hang on that fence and do a freestanding object in the park itself.
I think the place to save money is installation. I mean, I don't know how hard it is to install these logs. I mean, I haven't looked at that, but
right.
It has to be set in some kind of concrete base, and it's not all that difficult.
No, I'm sure our guys could do that. Right now, do these costs include installation, or is this is just material, right?
Yeah, we discussed that at the last board meeting, that we were going to try to spend the $15,000 just on items alone, and then budget for the install in the next fiscal year.
Okay. Yeah, but it seems like maybe this is probably pretty straightforward installation stuff. I don't see it being that complicated, except for maybe the slide, right? That slide that's built into the hill.
Yeah, and all the installation specs for all of these things are on the website. So
yeah,
it's easily accessible.
Sure. Have Marcos give me a call. Come out and give me a hand.
Okay. So I'm not sure how the board would like to do this. Do you want to talk about, do you want me to move forward to Elks and tell you what I've got down here for Elks, or do we want to make some decisions about Reba first?
Are you looking for direction from the board on what to pick?
Yes.
I'd be happy to do it park by park and make a decision on Reba right now.
Okay. Are there any strong feelings either way between acrylic painting board or a chalkboard?
I think a chalkboard makes more sense because chalk is more easily accessible to people, and you don't want people to bring paint and paint with something that's not going to come off. A chalkboard,
agree.
I think, is-
Second that.
Yeah, I agree.
and everybody can get a thing of chalk pretty cheaply.
We can leave some out, and also you can use water too on a chalkboard.
For sure. Okay. And then how are we feeling about the 5-piece log cluster or the stump activity table? It's also, of course, you know this, but it's also fine to say you don't like either one of them. These are just things that I thought would fit.
I like the 5-piece. Seems a little more active to me.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah. We also have that table right there already.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. What I'm going to do with the things that that the board is excited about tonight, I'm going to take them to the to my contact at Bean and Stock and get a quote for the whole thing, just to make sure that we're in line with our budget, just so you know. All right, great. So I feel like we're all kind of agreed on a chalkboard and a 5-piece log cluster for Reba.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, great. So then moving on to Elks Park. Elks Park does not currently have any natural playground pieces. There is an excellent hill space, lots of opportunity all along the train tracks there that would lend itself well to a hill slide. I'm also recommending taking advantage of the close proximity to the train to install some natural music makers. And then I had said if you decided to bypass on the log cluster at Reba, it could also fit in nicely here as well, or the wacky posts to tie it all together and create some seating climbing opportunities. So the wacky posts, just FYI, and there's a spec of those in here as well. They're essentially like large logs that they're installed into the ground and the kids can climb on them. You can also purchase like ties, like zip line ties kind of to run between them to create like a kind of like a tightrope situation. They can swing with them. They can do lots of things like that too. So I had spoke with her, with my contact at Bean and Stock, and she had said you can get them for like $20 at like at a Walmart or a Target or something. She said they're really cool and there's lots of fun things you can do, and they will send us instructions and a list of suggestions for that as well. So that's what the wacky posts are. The natural play or instruments that I had selected that I thought would be fun. There's some thunder drums. This is a three-piece set that are mounted to logs. And then the other thing that I thought would be fun is a hanging, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, a mandinda. It's like a xylophone. It's a wooden xylophone. And then the hill slide. So I will say there's an option on this hill slide that is the difference in cost here. One comes with Duralon and one does not. Duralon is a material that you place around the slide that allows for grass to grow, but also makes it accessible, is how they explained it to me. She said if you don't get the Duralon, sometimes folks can like wood chip around it. There's some other things that you can do, but if you want to include the Duralon, that's what it is, and that's the like essentially $3,000 or $2,500 price difference.
Would that be something we can add later?
I'm not sure, but I can ask.
Okay.
I can ask.
So if I may, I went, I was there with Natalie looking at it. I think that hill is pretty gradual. My thought would be to do the slide, the drums, and 3 wacky posts. If we do, based on our budget, subtracting the 1,500 for shipping, with what we've chosen for Reba Park, that leaves us with roughly 10,400. If we get 3 wacky posts, which I think is a good number, that leaves us at like 9,950. And then my preference would be to do Thunder Drums, the slide, and then again the 3 wacky posts at Elks. My reason behind that is the xylophone, Amendindo, whatever you want to call it, kind of somewhat requires like a metal object or something to hit it with, which you then kind of have to attach to it. It gets lost and then it doesn't work as well. I think the drums are colorful. I think they'll be better and you can just pound on them with your hands. So it'd even be more like I think about like my 1.5-year-old would love that, right? But could also be used by older kids as well. I just think the age for that would be better. And then again, the slide and those wacky posts, because I think those seem like fun. So we would be able to afford all of it if we are doing the cheaper option on the slide. So that's why I asked if that could be, based on my math, we'd be able to afford all of it with like $600 left over. If we don't do the whatever that stuff is on the outside of that slide.
Natalie, do we have access to wood chips?
Yes.
Okay.
The guys could easily chip it if needed. I mean, they chip some of the playgrounds annually, right, Natalie? So I mean, they could add that to it, right? And additionally, like I said, I think Dan, I don't know if you remember, but a lot of that hill was pretty gradual. So you could even install it in a way where you put it on a, maybe a hillier part, but there's a much more gradual way to get to it if you take a longer route to get up to it. Obviously some planning would go into that with the people from the company, but yeah, that's my thinking.
Natalie, regarding those drums, would they interfere with the people who live there? Would that be a problem with people who live right there?
So we talked about putting this nature play stuff kind of central of the park. So it's not going to be close to that apartment building.
But wouldn't the slide be close because of that gradual decline?
There's a pretty good decline, like there's a pretty good hill space all along that train track. So I think that we can probably find a good spot to cluster all of this together to create a little nature play space, like further south on Elks Park. And one of the reasons that that's interesting to me is we have concerts and things at Elks, and we have a play circuit over there, but families can't really keep an eye on their kids and stay in the area for the concerts. The proximity is not very close. So this would create a little play area where, families could be a part of that. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
It's also going to be right up against the metro tracks is my thought, right? So any noise that somebody wants to say, oh, there's kids banging a drum. Well, there's a massive commuter train going through every 20 minutes every day of the week. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
Yeah. And intentionally, I don't want to put it right behind that apartment building. Like, I think we can find a space further south, like I said, that
And we also talked about possibly, guard, whatever else for that. But yeah, I think is kind of not all the way south in that park, but somewhere centrally in that southern end of that hill there. We kind of identified that kind of clump of trees there that looked really nice and would be a good place for it.
Yeah. There's a picnic table over there.
Right. And the trees kind of protected from the baseball and separated from the baseball outfield as well.
Yeah.
I like Mick's proposal for Elks.
Nick, what were your numbers again?
So I started at 13,500 because of shipping.
Right.
With the chalkboard and the 5-piece cluster, that took us to 10,400 roughly.
Right.
Subtracted 484.98 for 3 wacky posts, which got me at 99.50 roughly. So now you have 99.50 left for the drums and the slide. So 99.50 minus 4,300 leaves us with roughly 5,600 for the easy for the slide.
Yeah, the cheaper of the two.
Right. We'd be able to afford the cheaper of the two, which I understand from what Natalie says, it's the same slide. The only difference is whatever the install that they do is on the Duraline, whatever that is on the outside, which we talked about, which I asked Natalie to maybe ask them to see if that would be something that we could add later, right? So we can maybe add to this play place, not only with the liner, but also more objects if we see it getting a lot of use, or we just, that $3,000 is a lot of wood chips over the course of 10 years.
I got the sense from her that the Duralon is important because it makes it accessible, but also there's other things you can do to make it accessible. But the Duralon also allows the grass to grow. I think the hills that we're looking at, there's not a lot of grass happening on those hills anyway. So I think wood chips is probably the better route to go anyway. And she said there are other possibilities. So I'll talk to her more about that when I call her. But I think that the Duralon for us is maybe not a priority.
So it looks like, based on a quick Google search, Duralon is essentially an artificial grass surface. So it's kind of like a turf. So my issue with that would be, where do you start it and where do you end it? I think something like that probably would require maybe like a border or something like that, which I'm assuming is included in the cost. But while accessibility on something like this is definitely important, it's also a nature-based play area, and kind of having it as part of the hill is I thought what kind of we were envisioning as well.
Yeah.
Natalie, what's delivery on this?
Shoot. I think she said 6 to 10 weeks.
Okay. I'm here 11.
I was gonna say Brian's doing his math. He's like, am I gonna have to deal with this headache, or am I gonna be gone?
Any other commissioners have any suggestions for Natalie? All right, we ready to move on?
Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Natalie, again for pointing out.
Yep.
All right, we are moving on to agenda item 11, is the call of the commissioners. Julie, could you roll call the commissioners?
Braun,
Nothing.
Anton,
Nothing.
Morel,
Nope.
Mitchell,
Nope.
and Rogers.
Nothing for me.
Moving on to citizen comments. Hearing none. I am going to move that we, it's not adjourn, but recess to executive session to discuss the interview process for the executive director position. Charles, you available to join us?
I will be there.
Great. Do you have that link?
I do. I have to find it, but I have it.
Okay. All right. So then it'll just be the commissioners and Charles, and we will come back and adjourn from there. Anything further? All right. All right, Mick.
Hello, Matt.
I don't know if anybody else is coming. All those in
All right.
favor of adjourning?
Yes.
Unanimous of all the commissioners present, and Julie. Thanks, Julie.
You bet. Have a good
All
day.
Good night.